I'm going to tell you a story. Do you want me to tell you a story? I don't care. I'm going to tell you a story. So a couple weeks ago, we released CpMate, and then we released a video talking about a neat feature of CpMate that we can use CpMate in order to load JavaScript files into Captivate. And people said, great, this is amazing. We've needed this for years. And I've said, yes, we have needed it for years. And then we got an email from a person saying, it's like, this is all great and all, but in order to use this, I need to have 2 plugins and Adobe Animate just to load JavaScript files into Captivate. You already have a plugin for Adobe Captivate, CpExtra. Isn't there a way just to load JavaScript files using CpExtra by itself? And we said to them, no, there isn't. There isn't. You know why? We've been trying to crack this nut for 5 years. 5 years we've trying to find a way to load JavaScript files into Adobe Captivate using just CpExtra. And you might go, Tristan, you're overreacting a little bit here. Surely it can't be that difficult. Okay, what do you have here? You have your Adobe Captivate project, yes. Okay, you've got your export folder where you've got your export for your Adobe Captivate project. Yes, that's it. What else do you have? Okay, you have your JavaScript file. Yes, you do. Well, surely it can't be that difficult. Let's just take your JavaScript file, we'll copy it, and then we'll go to our export folder. We will paste the JavaScript file in there. All you need to do is point to that file, load it, and run it. And they say, yes, that would be wonderful. That would be so simple. Except when you publish your Captivate project again, do you know what it does? Does it go to your folder and then it just finds all the files that it made before and then it deletes those and then brings you back new ones? No, it deletes the entire folder and creates it again, which means that JavaScript code that you just wrote is gone. Every single time you republish your project, you have to go paste the JavaScript file back in there. And if you forget to do that, everything breaks. If you're working in that JavaScript file, in that export folder, you are very likely to delete all the work that you just did. That is not an acceptable way to get this to work. And you say, okay, Tristan, okay, calm down. This is still workable. See, yes, Captivate deletes this folder, but it doesn't delete the folder above it. Just put the JavaScript folder above the export folder and then load it in that way. And no, you can't do that. That doesn't work. Why? Because you've forgotten about SCORM. With SCORM, you have to have your Captivate export file be the root file. You can't put it in a subfolder just so that you can load JavaScript files in. It will work, sure, if you're not exporting for SCORM, but most of our client base is. And you say, okay, Tristan, okay. If this is so important to you, then just find a way to get Captivate to put the JavaScript file into the export folder every time it publishes. And no, you can't do that. Well, yeah, wait, Tristan. Look, go to the library. If you go to the library, there is a button here for import. You can use this to import PDF files, and it will include the PDF file in the export. And yes, it does include the PDF file, but no, it won't include JavaScript files. We have tried to request this feature for Captivate for 5 years, and no one has listened. And then you say, okay, Tristan, okay, it's not so bad. All you have to do, go get a button. Okay, you get a button and then go to its success action. For its success action, pick the option that we hardly ever pick, this open URL or file. Okay, then go navigate to your JavaScript file there, okay, and then go publish the file. And no, that doesn't work. Do you know why it doesn't work? Because although you've actually pointed to that JavaScript file, it's not going to include it. You go to your export folder and you see that the JavaScript file is not there. Well, that would have been nice to have known 5 years earlier. Okay, here's the deal. We just released CpExtra 1.5.1, where we have added exactly one new command variable. Let's go create that command variable now by going to Project, Variables, Add New, and we will name this variable xcmd load JS from action. Okay, what does this command variable do? Well, it uses this little quirk that we found here of this open URL or file action to load and play JavaScript files. What we do is we set up our button with this action, and then we take the name of our button here, and we're going to assign it to xcmd load.js from action. Then at runtime, what CpExtra will do is we'll find this button, find this action, find the link to the JavaScript file, then load it and run it. So where will we make this assignment? Well, just for the start of this movie, let's make the assignment to the xcmd load.js from action command variable in the slide interaction of my project. Okay, and then we paste in the name of the button. So if everything's working correctly, well, what will happen? Well, this JavaScript file should run its code. So what code is it? Well, here's the code that's currently inside of it. It just sends up an alert box telling us that our JavaScript code has run. So let's go preview our project. And if everything's working correctly, when I press play, we should see the alert box appear. Alert box JS code run. And just like that, we have added a feature to Captivate that it should have had 5 years ago, which is a huge relief. A good thing about this method is that it is very easy to update our code. So for example, let's create a user variable. Call it my var, and we'll give it a default value. And let's display my var inside of a shape. Okay, so we'll select the shape, we'll go to the properties, we'll click the insert variable button, we will select the my var variable, let's increase its maximum length. Okay, and display that. I will go back to my JavaScript file and let's just change the code here so that it accesses the my var Captivate user variable, which all we have to do is type out its name to do that. And then we're going to set it equal to, let's just say the name of this file, code.js. Okay, let's save the file and then publish again. And if everything works correctly, when we press play, we won't see the alert box appear, but we should see that the my var value has changed to code.js. So it updates as well. We can also use this command variable to load multiple JavaScript files at once. So let's create another JavaScript file to test this. I'm just going to copy my code.js and I'll paste in a new one. Let's change its name to just code2. Not a great naming system, but anyway, this is just for example. We'll edit the code inside here to change my var to be, let's say, plus equals code.js. So code2.js. So this will add its name onto the end of the my var variable rather than just completely replacing it. Okay, with that done, let's go back to Captivate. We will select our button, and we've currently got its onSuccess action set up to load a JavaScript file, but we can also change its, let's uncheck infinite attempts. We also have a last attempt action. We can change the last attempt action to also open URL or file, also open, let's say, our code2.js. And because we already have xcmd load.js from action pointing to this button, what's going to happen is CpExtra will look at both the success action and the last attempt action and load both of these JavaScript files. So if everything's working, when we go test our project, what we find should happen when we press play is that we see both code.js and code2.js appear. Okay, so what just happened there? Okay, what happened is a little bit of a difficulty. Okay, so we are using this action here, the open URL or file, just to get our JavaScript file included in our export. However, if we actually trigger this open URL or file action by, I don't know, clicking this button, it's going to open our JavaScript file and display it for us, which is probably not something that we want it to do. So we should hide our buttons that do this. Now, a nice thing about loading JavaScript files in this way is that we can use these to load JavaScript files saved on our computer, but we can also use them to load JavaScript files on remote servers somewhere else on the internet. This is something that is quite common for people who use JavaScript libraries. So for example, last time with CpMate, I showed you how to load the SweetAlert library. And to do that, what we had to do was go to GitHub and then scroll down to where this page had a link to this JS Deliverer CDN. And then from there, open up the SweetAlert to all min.js. And then we had to copy all the code inside of here. However, with this particular method, all we have to do is take the URL to this JavaScript file here, copy it, and then we can go to our button, and then instead of loading this code to JS, I'm going to swap it out for the link to the online version of the SweetAlert library. So to test that this works, let's create another button. Okay, and we'll change it to say show alert. And now let's change its action to be execute JavaScript. And the JavaScript that we want to run will display one of these SweetAlert alerts. So to do that, let's just go back to the SweetAlert main page where it gives us some examples. For example, it says this code should produce a SweetAlert that looks like that. Okay, well, let's just copy that code, go back to Captivate, paste this into the JavaScript dialog, click OK, and let's preview our project again. Let's click play, click show alert, and there you can see that we have SweetAlert loaded and running inside of Captivate, even though we did not download the SweetAlert JS file onto our system. It is loading it remotely from another server. So this could be quite useful for you, though do keep in mind that if you are working for a client who is somewhat pedantic about security issues, they may see you loading code from somewhere off out into the internet and see that as being a security risk. So just be a little careful about this. Now we have two problems with the way we are currently loading our JavaScript. The first problem is that because we are using an onEnter slide action to load our JavaScript, if we later on went to slide 2 and then jump back to slide 1, CpExtra is going to load and execute this JavaScript for a second time. The second problem is if we are on slide 2 and we say, hey, on slide 1 I loaded this SweetAlert library, so on slide 2 I'm going to make another SweetAlert appear. Well, that will work as long as we are not using self-paced learning or a SCORM LMS. If we are using one of those two things, we have to consider the possibility that the Captivate project will start from a slide other than the first slide. It could start on slide 10, it could start on slide 30, but you cannot depend on slide 1 to be the slide where you run all your setup code, such as loading in your JavaScript libraries. So in order to get around these two problems, we should set up an init action. We can do this using CpExtra's preference variables. So let's go to project variables. We'll add a new variable and we'll call it xpref init action. This preference variable is going to allow us to run an action right at the beginning of the movie, no matter what slide the movie starts on. What action will we get it to run? Well, we first of all need to assign xpref init action the name of an interactive object, such as the buttons that we've been using before. So I'm going to give it the name of init button action. Okay, I will copy that name, save, close. I will go back to my first slide. I'm going to add in yet another button. Okay, and I will change its name to init button action. And just for the sake of making it easier for me to track, I'm going to change its label. I'm going to hide this button as well because I don't actually ever want it to be clicked by the learner. I am just wanting to use this button as a way to register an action to be run at the start of the movie. Now, what action do I want to be run? Well, how about this assignment to xcmd load.js from action? So let's just get rid of it here. I'm actually going to give my button here a bit more of a descriptive name because that's good practice. Let's call it just JS_loader. And I will change its label as well, or its caption, sorry. Once again, that's just to help us keep track. Okay, so let's go back to init button action. Let's go to its success action. This is the action which is going to be run right at the beginning of the movie. And I am going to assign xcmd load JS from action then with JS loader here. Okay, now I could set this up with an advanced action to do more than one thing at the start of the movie, but for the moment, let's just do this. And I'll uncheck continue playing the project. Okay, so let's preview again, just to make sure that we haven't broken anything. In order to test this properly, you would have to go to a LMS or set up self-paced learning, but we don't have time to do this. Okay, but anyway, that should work for that situation. Bear in mind that with xcmd load.js from action, we can use @ syntax or hash syntax. So if I put in a hash at the end here, it's going to look through the entire project and find all of the interactive objects whose name have JS_ at the start. So if I copied this JS loader button here, made a new one, let's call it JS loader 2. Okay, and I will get rid of the failure action, but I'm going to change the success action to load this code to JS. Okay, and let's just change this. So even though this assignment to xcmd load.js from action is only one assignment, it will actually find both of these buttons and load all of the JavaScript files associated with them. So let's just preview that as well. Okay, and if this works, we can see, yep, both code.js and code2.js have loaded, as well as Sweet Alert. Now, before we finish, I just want to talk to you about a little gotcha that you might come across when you are testing your Captivate project. What if I go back to my Captivate project, I take my show alert button, and I move it over to the second slide here. And now I'm going to preview the next 5 slides. Okay, when I play the project, you'll see that I've come across an error. It says that it could not find init button action. But init button action does exist. It's over here on slide 1. The problem is when I select slide 2 and I publish the next 5 slides, it's not going to include slide 1 in the export, which in this case causes us this annoying bug. So when using these features, you will always have to choose the preview project option. However, this might be very slow for the project that you are using because maybe you are testing slide 30 of 100 and it takes you a long time to navigate to that slide. Well, CpExtra has just added a new preference variable, which is called xpref_start_slide. And we can give that an @ syntax name, let's say _start_slide. And what will happen is that CpExtra will look through all of our slides, the names of those slides, and find the first one which matches this pattern, namely that it's got _start_slide at the end of its label. It will then, at the start of the movie, automatically jump to that slide. So I'm going to go to slide 2 here and say name _start_slide. And now if I preview my project, so we are now including all of our slides in our export, but when I press play, it will instantly jump me to slide 2, which still has all of the JavaScript loaded correctly. You will just have to remember before exporting, make sure you take off that _start slide suffix from the slide name. So there we go. This is a very big and exciting feature for CpExtra. Now, if you had bought CpMate solely for the ability to load JavaScript files into Captivate, I am very sorry. This is just the way things work sometimes. You work on a problem for 5 years, you assume, nope, there's no way to fix this with just CpExtra. We'll have to, sorry people, we'll just have to use this inside of CpMate and create a slightly convoluted way of loading JavaScript files in, and then literally a week after you release that, you find out that there's a better way of doing it with just CpExtra. Now, it is worth mentioning that there is one area where loading JavaScript using the CpMate method is better than the CpExtra method, and that is if you need to keep the JavaScript code bundled inside of the project because you are sharing that project with other people. If you have that requirement, then this xcmd load.js from action is not going to work, because when you send your Captivate project to someone else, they are not going to have those JavaScript files set up in the same file locations. Or maybe they will because you told them to do that, but if you're working on a team and you're trying to incorporate xcmd load.js from action, you will need to make sure everyone on the team has those same JavaScript files at the same file location on their computer to get that to work. And this is a slightly easier trick to pull off probably with CpMate, although everyone of course will still have to have CpExtra installed on their machine regardless of which method you use. So there you go, very excited to see how you'll be able to start using more JavaScript inside of your Captivate courses using CpExtra and xcmd load from action.